The wagon from the east. The sun over Wyoming was sinking behind the western hills, painting the plains in molten gold. A lonesome wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the scent of dust, grass, and the faintest trace of rain. Standing by the corral fence, Caleb Hart shaded his eyes beneath the brim of his weathered hat. The light caught the rugged lines of his face, a man shaped by sun and solitude. For 5 long years, Caleb had lived alone on Hart Creek Ranch, a stretch of land so wide that even the wind got lost on its way through. His days were simple, dawn to dusk of work, cattle drives, mending fences, and cooking his own beans. Nights were harder, just him, the coyote's cry, and the echo of memories too far gone to reach. He'd inherited this land after his father's death, and though it gave him freedom, it also chained him with silence. But today was different. Today, a stagecoach was coming from the east. 3 months ago, in a moment of rare longing, Caleb had written to a mail-order bride agency in Boston. He hadn't expected to hear back, but he did. Her name was Eleanor Grace, 22, raised in the city, but yearning for a quieter life. In her letters, she wrote of poetry, piano music, and the way she loved the smell of rain on old cobblestone. She had a gentle tone in her words, one that made Caleb imagine what her laughter might sound like. He'd written her only 3 times, but in those short letters, he'd begun to feel something he hadn't felt in years, hope. Now, as the horizon shimmered with heat and dust, that hope turned to nerves. He ran a hand over his clean shirt, freshly pressed, though slightly uneven, and straightened his hat. His boots were polished. His heart wasn't. It thudded like a drum inside his chest. From down the trail came the sound he'd been waiting for, the rumble of wagon wheels and the rhythmic clatter of hooves. A plume of dust rose on the road, catching the glow of the setting sun. Caleb took a deep breath. "This is it," he whispered. The stagecoach rounded the bend and came to a halt in front of Dry Hollow Station, a small stop where only the brave or desperate ever got off. The driver, an old man with a white beard, cracked the reins and hollered, "End of the line, Dry Hollow." Caleb's pulse raced. He stepped forward as the door swung open. A young woman stepped down, graceful as a spring morning. She had auburn hair tucked beneath a modest bonnet, eyes bright as green glass, and a shy smile that stopped his breath. She was everything he imagined. "Miss Eleanor Grace?" he asked softly. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying that same warmth he'd felt in her letters. "You must be Mr. Caleb Hart." He tipped his hat. "Ma'am, it's good to finally meet you." Before he could say more, another voice came from inside the coach. "Don't forget the trunk, Ellie." Another woman appeared. The same face, the same hair, the same everything. Caleb blinked, stepping back. There were 2 of her. The second woman jumped lightly to the ground, brushed the dust from her skirt, and smiled. The same smile, but brighter, quicker, livelier. "I'm Clara Grace," she said, offering her hand. "Eleanor's twin sister." Caleb's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. "You are your twin?" Eleanor nodded with a soft, nervous smile. "Yes, we're identical, though our manners aren't." Clara laughed. "She means she's the polite one." Caleb blinked again, his mind trying to piece together what was happening. 2 women, identical in face, one standing shyly beside the other. This wasn't what he'd signed up for, but it wasn't the kind of surprise a man could complain about. "Well," he managed, "you've both come a long way. You must be tired." "That we are," Eleanor said gently. "The journey was rough." Caleb nodded, lifting their travel trunk onto his wagon. "Come on, then. My ranch is about an hour's ride from here. We'll get you settled." The journey back was quiet at first. The wind rustled the grass around them, and the wagon creaked with the rhythm of the trail. Caleb stole glances now and then, studying them both. They were identical, yes, but the difference lay in their eyes. Eleanor's gaze was soft and thoughtful. She watched the horizon as though memorizing it. Clara's eyes sparkled with curiosity, taking in every cactus, every bird, every stretch of endless land like a new adventure. "You sure don't have much out here," Clara said, breaking the silence. Caleb chuckled. "Depends on how you look at it. Out here, what you see is what you've got: sky, wind, and freedom." Clara grinned. "Freedom's nice, but a piano or 2 wouldn't hurt." Eleanor rolled her eyes, smiling. "My sister is teasing you, Mr. Hart. She's never been this far from Boston." "That's all right," he said. "I was raised out here. I forget sometimes what it must look like to new eyes." Eleanor tilted her head. "To me it looks vast, untamed, beautiful." He looked at her then, really looked. The setting sun lit her hair like fire, and something deep inside him stirred. Maybe this lonely land was about to become a home again. By the time they reached Hart Creek Ranch, night had fallen. The house stood against the horizon, warm lamplight spilling through the windows. "It's not fancy," Caleb said as he helped them down, "but it's sturdy. My pa built it himself." Eleanor smiled. "It's lovely." Inside, the smell of oak and smoke greeted them. The big stone fireplace crackled gently. Clara ran her fingers along the mantel, examining a framed photograph of Caleb's parents. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Been that way for years," he said. Eleanor looked around the cabin, her eyes softening at the little details: a handmade quilt, the worn Bible on the shelf, the rows of books Caleb had gathered over the years. "It feels peaceful," she said quietly. Caleb cleared his throat. "You must be hungry. I've got stew on the stove." Dinner was simple but filling. The twins thanked him graciously, though Clara made a few jokes about his oversalted biscuits. Caleb found himself laughing more than he had in months. After the meal, he showed them to the guest room. "You can both stay in here for now," he said. "I'll sleep in the barn until we sort everything out." Eleanor frowned gently. "Mr. Hart, you don't need to. It's only right," he said. "I was expecting one bride, not two. Figure we'll need to talk things through before anything's decided." Clara grinned. "Don't worry, Cowboy. We won't both marry you." Caleb blushed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Much appreciated, ma'am." Eleanor hid a smile. "Clara is teasing. I'm the one who wrote to you, Mr. Hart. But I couldn't leave her behind. Not yet." He nodded slowly. "I understand. It's a long road for Boston. You take all the time you need." That night, long after the house went quiet, Caleb lay awake in the barn, staring up at the rafters. The air smelled of hay and horses. Through the window, he could see the faint glow of lamplight still burning in the house. He imagined the two sisters whispering, unpacking, laughing softly. Two identical faces, one calm, one wild. He couldn't tell, yet, which one had already found her way into his heart. The days that followed passed in quiet rhythm. Eleanor tended to the house, sewing curtains and baking bread that filled the air with warmth. Clara joined Caleb in the fields, eager to learn how to saddle a horse and rope cattle. "She's got spirit," Caleb told Eleanor one afternoon. Eleanor smiled as she kneaded dough. "She always has. She's braver than I am, in many ways." Caleb hesitated. "I don't think that's true." Their eyes met, a moment quiet and unspoken. There was something in her gaze that reminded him of the stillness before dawn, something that made him forget the years of loneliness behind him. When Clara came bursting in later, covered in dust, but grinning wide, the moment vanished like smoke. "I lassoed my first steer," she declared proudly. Eleanor laughed, shaking her head. "I'm sure you terrified the poor creature." Caleb smiled. "You did good, Clara." For a moment, as the twins stood side by side in the fading sunlight, he couldn't tell where admiration ended and confusion began. A week passed, then another. The three of them settled into a rhythm, like a strange little family. But at night, Caleb found himself restless. Every small moment, a shared smile, a stray glance, the brush of a hand, seemed to carry more meaning than it should. Sometimes it was Eleanor's quiet eyes that haunted him. Sometimes it was Clara's fearless laughter. And one evening, while he sat on the porch watching the sun die behind the hills, Eleanor joined him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "What's that? Living out here alone, so far from everyone." He thought for a long moment before answering. "I used to think I'd never mind the quiet. But it ain't the quiet that hurts. It's having no one to share it with." Eleanor's eyes glistened in the dusk. "Then maybe you were meant to have company again." He turned to her, words caught in his throat. The golden light wrapped around her face, and for a heartbeat, he wanted to reach out, but before he could, Clara's voice called from inside. "Ellie, you got to see the sunset from the hill." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Duty calls," she said, rising to her feet. And just like that, the moment slipped away again. Caleb sat back, watching the twins walk toward the hill together, their silhouettes side by side in the fading light. Two identical sisters, one heart growing dangerously uncertain. He'd sent for one bride, but fate, mischievous and unpredictable, had sent him two, and deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of a story that could change everything. The choice beneath the western sky. Morning light spilled over Hart Creek Ranch, turning the golden fields into a sea of light. The rooster had crowed hours ago, but the house was already awake, the smell of coffee and warm bread drifting through the air. Eleanor stood by the window, her hair loose around her shoulders. She was watching the horizon again, that faraway look in her eyes, the same look she wore when she was writing letters. Clara sat at the table, braiding her hair, humming a tune she'd picked up from one of the ranch hands in town. "Sleep well?" Clara asked with a grin. "Somewhat," Eleanor said softly. "I kept thinking about how different this land feels. It's alive, Clara. It's like it breathes. It's wild," Clara said, "and stubborn, like that cowboy of yours." Eleanor turned, smiling faintly. "He's not mine yet." Clara raised a brow. "Maybe not, but the way he looks at you says otherwise." Eleanor flushed, turning back to the window. "And the way you look at him?" Clara froze. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Then Clara stood, her voice light but unconvincing. "I like him, sure. Anyone would. He's honest, kind, and built like he was carved from a mountain. But you're the one who wrote to him. You're the one he's supposed to marry." Eleanor sighed, pressing a hand to her chest. Supposed to and meant to aren't always the same thing. Out by the barn, Caleb Hart was mending a fence rail, his mind far from the work in front of him. The rhythm of hammer and wood couldn't drown out the thoughts crowding his head. He'd known hard choices before, when to sell cattle, when to fight drought, when to start over after a bad season. But this was different. He could fix fences. He couldn't fix hearts. Every time he looked at Eleanor, he felt peace. Every time he looked at Clara, he felt fire. Peace or fire. Comfort or adventure. The two halves of the same face, and both pulling him in opposite directions. He heard laughter behind him. Clara approached, carrying a bucket of oats, the morning light dancing in her auburn hair. "You look like you're thinking yourself into a headache again," she teased. Maybe I am, he admitted. Want help fixing that fence? He handed her a hammer. If you don't mind getting your hands dirty. She smirked. You forget who caught a wild colt last week. They worked side by side for an hour, trading jokes and easy silences. At one point, she wiped sweat from her brow and leaned against the post, watching him. You ever think about what you really want, Caleb? He stopped mid-swing. Every day. And what's the answer? He met her gaze, his voice quiet. That's the problem. I ain't sure anymore. Something in her smile faltered. She turned away, hammering the next nail with more force than needed. Maybe you're scared of wanting the wrong thing, she said softly. Maybe, he replied. Or maybe I'm scared of hurting someone who don't deserve it. They didn't speak after that. The sound of hammering filled the space where words should have been. That evening, rain rolled in from the west. Thunder rumbled over the hills, and wind lashed against the windows. Inside the ranch house, the fire crackled while Eleanor read aloud from a worn book of poems. Her voice was steady, warm, a comfort against the storm outside. Caleb sat across from her, watching the firelight flicker across her face. And when the dawn breaks, she read, May love be the light that remains. She closed the book and looked up. Beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, he said quietly. It is. Clara, who'd been staring into the flames, suddenly stood. I'll check on the horses. Before anyone could stop her, she pulled on her coat and slipped outside into the storm. Clara, Eleanor called after her. It's pouring. Caleb rose instantly. I'll go with her. He ran out into the rain, the wind howling like a living thing. Lightning flashed across the sky, turning the fields into brief bursts of white. He found Clara by the barn, struggling with the door as it banged against the wind. Let me, he shouted, pulling it closed. They stood breathless in the dark barn, rain hammering the roof above. Reckless, he said, half smiling, half angry. You could have been struck out there. She grinned, soaked but unbothered. I've never been one for sitting still while the world shakes. Caleb shook his head. Your trouble, Clara Grace. She stepped closer. Maybe, but trouble's what makes a man feel alive. The air between them shifted. The storm outside roared, but inside, time seemed to still. Her hand brushed his chest, and he caught it gently, holding it there. Clara, he whispered. I know, she said, her voice trembling. You don't have to say it. I can see it in your eyes. He let go, stepping back, torn between desire and duty. This ain't right. I gave my word to your sister. Clara's eyes shone, fierce and sad. You gave your word before you ever met me. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she turned away, her shoulders stiff, her voice breaking. You should go, Caleb. He hesitated, then did. The door slammed behind him, and the rain swallowed his footsteps. The next morning dawned gray and cold. The storm had passed, but the silence in the house felt heavier than thunder. Clara stayed in her room. Eleanor busied herself with chores, her expression unreadable. By afternoon, Caleb couldn't bear it anymore. He found Eleanor by the corral, brushing one of the horses. Her bonnet fluttered in the wind, and her hands moved with quiet grace. Eleanor, he said softly. She turned. Her eyes were calm, but he could see the questions behind them. You don't owe me an explanation, she said before he could speak. Yes, I do, he said. You came all this way, and I reckon I've done nothing but confuse you. She smiled faintly. You're not the only one confused. He stepped closer. I didn't expect two of you. I didn't expect any of this. I know, she said, and I don't blame you. Clara has always had a way of stealing hearts without meaning to. He shook his head. She didn't steal nothing. I gave it. Or maybe I gave pieces of it to both of you. Eleanor looked down, tears glinting in her lashes. Do you love her? He hesitated too long. That's what I thought, she whispered. He reached for her hand. But I love you too. Just different. She pulled away gently. Different isn't enough, Caleb. A man's heart can't ride two horses at once. He stared at her, helpless. Then what do I do? Tell her the truth, she said simply. And then tell yourself. That night, he found Clara sitting by the fire, staring into the flames again. She didn't look up when he entered. Eleanor told me, she said quietly, that you're trying to figure out which one of us to love. He sat across from her, the weight of his own confusion pressing down like the roof of a storm. I ain't proud of it, he said, but I've never met two people who made me feel so much in such different ways. She smiled sadly. You don't have to choose, Caleb. I already did. He frowned. What do you mean? I'm leaving, she said. Tomorrow. There's a schoolhouse in Dry Hollow, needs a teacher. The kids don't care about mistakes of the heart. He stared at her. You don't have to go. Yes, I do. She stood, crossing to him. You and Ellie, you belong here. She's the quiet to your storm. I'm just the wind that passes through. Clara. She placed a finger on his lips. Don't make it harder. You don't owe me anything. Just remember me when the wind blows through these hills. Her voice cracked on the last words, and before he could answer, she kissed his cheek, turned, and walked away. The next morning, the wagon waited at the edge of the property. Clara hugged Eleanor tight, tears slipping silently down both their faces. You all right? Eleanor whispered. Of course, Claire said. And don't you dare cry. Not when you're getting everything you ever wanted. Eleanor shook her head. It doesn't feel like that. Caleb stood nearby, his hat low over his eyes. You sure you don't want me to take you? Clara smiled. I came on my own, Cowboy. I can leave the same way. He reached out, taking her hand. For what it's worth. I'll miss you. I know, she said softly. That's what makes it beautiful. The wagon driver snapped the reins. The horses started forward. Clara waved once, a flash of green dress against the morning light, and then she was gone. Eleanor stood beside Caleb, watching the dust rise and fade. Neither spoke for a long while. Finally, she said, "You loved her." He nodded. "I reckon I did. But I love you too. And I don't think love's a thing that divides. It just finds where it belongs." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes shimmering. "And where does it belong now?" He took her hand. "Right here, if you'll still have me." She smiled through tears. "I will." That evening, the sun dipped low over Hart Creek. The ranch was quiet except for the soft sounds of cattle and the hum of wind through the grass. Caleb and Eleanor sat on the porch steps, watching the light fade. The air smelled of pine and rain. In the distance, a lone hawk wheeled over the ridge. "Funny thing," Caleb said softly. "I sent for one bride, and the good Lord sent me 2 lessons instead." Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder. "Maybe he wanted you to learn what love really is." He smiled. "And what's that?" She looked up at him. "It's not about who sets your heart on fire, Caleb. It's about who stays when the flames burn out." He kissed her forehead gently, the prairie wind wrapping around them like a blessing. In the distance, the horizon burned gold, endless and open, the same as the road ahead. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Hart knew he wasn't waiting anymore. He was home. The end.